Well, I think you have to be intentional about finding a mentor, because if you're not intentional, what will happen is the people come into your life in a fleeting moment. And if you're not intentionally looking, you're going to miss it. Without intent, you'll never have a mentor, right? Sure. You have to understand what you're seeking.
Welcome to the In the Arena podcast. My name is Jared Miguez, a co-host on this podcast that brings you the inspiring stories of our clients who are leaders and innovators across different industries in Southeast Louisiana. They are visionary entrepreneurs, savvy real estate professionals, media creators, military business owners, and community champions. And we are going to showcase the remarkable achievements and share their personal stories. Tune in for insightful conversations, valuable lessons, and motivational stories that are going to reveal their secrets to success and offer you insights to help you on your own path. Welcome to In the Arena podcast. Welcome to the In the Arena podcast. We got my one of my first employers and a good friend now, Chris Couch, with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Chris.
Really excited to have you. I know you're doing some cool things now, and you know the business world is what it's funny because you're an attorney, and when I worked for you 10 years ago, about now, you always treated the business like a business, right? Like I never really watched you actually practice law. Never seen you go to court.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Are you a fellow entrepreneur?
Yes.
I've dubbed myself an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can say that, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, it was kind of inspiring in a way for me to have one of my first employers, and you pulled me in close. Remember when you gave me the first book, "Crush It" by Gary Vaynerchuk, one of our first meetings together.
Good one.
Yeah, it's great, and interacting with you at your office in Metairie I was actually at downtown at the Benson Tower first time, and the way you ran your meetings, you had an executive assistant, and you leveraged out some things. I always was impressed by that, and it's probably a blessing and a curse that now I always just wanted to do that. I didn't want to go to court and do all the being a lawyer stuff. I wanted to be the one who was calling shots.
So then you achieve success,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Your butt has never been in the courtroom.
And if I can die saying that, I'll be a happy man. So
should we address the finder's fee now or afterwards? Okay.
I mean, I think you should start royalties. Is
Yeah.
where it's
Royalty.
at. So you just go ahead and start taking
royalty.
them.
We'll address that after.
That's out of your personal finances, though, not out of
Absolutely.
my P&L.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we can make that work. But I think it's important for the audience to know like what you've done as a lawyer and as a business owner. And you were a lawyer and you were a partner of business. You had some transition in your ownership. But what business were you in, and how did you get into the type of law that you practiced?
So I ended up doing collection work for the majority of my career. My dad was at a gym right before I was going into law school and met a guy who was an attorney. And so my dad said, "Oh, my son's going to law school." And this guy said, "Well, here's my card." And he took me to lunch. Ended up working for him, clerked for him, and he hired me and worked for him through 2007. So 2000 to 2007, and actually including my clerkship, which was very intense, I focused on transactional and complex litigation matters.
Cool.
In the meantime, the firm had a very small, kind of boutique-y commercial collection practice. I knew it was there. I didn't really do much with it. And it had a little bit of consumer, meaning like unsecured credit card and that type of stuff at the time. Again, I really, other than going to court on an occasion as the young guy in the block, I didn't know much about it. What I did know is that I had told my dad's friend, he said, "Well, if you go work for that guy, you're going to be doing collection work." And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not. I'm going on the real law side. I'm going to be doing going to court,
like
and
everybody
doing
does
trials." Little did I know. So as I got exposed, my boss and really taught me how to build a succession plan because very early on, he encouraged me to be involved in a lot of things outside of the normal work hours. So he would take me to conferences and things. And I started to meet a lot of lawyers who owned collection firms. And I've always kind of been a little entrepreneurial. And so that really started to show me that, well, I don't mind practicing law, but I don't know that that's really where I want to be forever. And so over the course of those 7 years, I got exposed to the collection business. And with great timing, summer of 2005, my boss came to me and said, "I think it's time for you to start managing the collection practice. Give up your litigation, and because we're going to be setting up a sale in the next couple of years, and I think it's time." I said, "This sounds great." We announced it to the staff, I think it was second week of August of 2005. And you know what happened about a week later? Katrina. So let's say that Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall pretty quickly. And so we had to put things back together, and we did. And things were very uncertain at the time. But through some great coaches and mentors, they said, stay the course, don't change firms. You have an opportunity maybe to buy this thing, and it's going to be hard to get other places. So I did, put it back together, and I bought the firm in January 1, 2008, with a couple of partners that I had met who were also in the business, like big brothers. And so I led it for 15 years, and we were able to grow the practice from about 20 people with 3 states to about 120 over 9 states.
Wow.
And
what
so
years? You said 15 years. What was that? Was from 2008
to 2023.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And in March of 2023, about 2 years ago, I sold out to my younger partners. So now I'm in a senior legal advisor role.
Senior, huh?
That sounds old.
It does.
Well, I'd say wise advisor.
Wise advisor.
Wise
role.
advisor. Yeah.
So, but something you said struck me. How early did you have coaches and consultants that you were working with in your career? I mean, you said in 2007 it was.
I have been very blessed. It's something that I thank the Lord for quite a lot.
Yeah.
Since I've been a child, I have had people like come into my life, both as passive and active mentors and coaches. And it's been amazing. So I've not really paid a lot of consultants because fortunately for me, I never really needed to do that all that often because I had so many people that younger, older, working hard and wealthy, just this interesting spectrum coming my way at all times. So I created my village.
What do you attribute that to?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I guess just because I was always eager to learn, I guess.
I would say
being open-minded. Yeah, it's an energy. I feel like it's an energy that draws people in. But I mean, to be honest, you brought it up, mentioning thanking the Lord. Like as you're speaking, my thought is just that has to be divine intervention, right? To see an opportunity and a challenge like a business crumbling that you're just taking over to rebuilding an entire new business to open up an opportunity for you to acquire a business. Like that is putting a challenge and turning it into growth. That is opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's no different than, I met Jared, and after literally 5 minutes, I said, this guy, he has intangibles that are rare, right? And I think part of it was maybe your eagerness to learn, amongst other things.
Those
right?
things you can't train.
That's exactly
right. A little
right.
bit naive, but but also just having the courage to know, and having people in your life that support you enough that you feel comfortable to be able to take a risk. I mean, that's what I contributed to.
Yes.
Growing up and having people like you said in your life that just came in that were always encouraging you, saying the right things, and being like, "Hey, you can do anything but yourself too. Like you're the lead horse. You're in charge." Like my grandma used to always say that. You can do anything you want to do. You're the lead horse. Don't disappoint me. It's like at that point, and if I did something wrong, she kept telling me again. You can, and at that point, after you hear that enough, you have a couple wins in your life. It's like, all right, well, I can do anything.
Right.
Yeah,
and then ultimately the opposite of me attracting some way all these coaches and mentors, and then the flip side is then I was able to start to find people coming into my life that were like I was and still am eager to learn, right? And Jared's one. My 2 younger partners, Ben and Serena, who are now leading the firm. I mean, perfect examples.
Yeah.
And so you get to receive it, and then to me the greatest part is you get to give it, right? And,
Amen. Yeah,
and
give it back.
It's been pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have used consultants over the years, but if you compared my village versus the consultants, I'm like, I'd take the village.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. I always say that like the most valuable people to me, I've never paid because they're not freaking trained. They just call me out on my crap, and that helps me out a lot.
Well, and it comes from their heart, right?
Yeah.
When you're mentoring someone, if you're hiring a consultant, there's a relationship, and at the end of the day, there's some economics to it, right?
Sure.
So as good as it can be, it's still not the same as having someone that you happen to meet at a coffee shop or at a conference, right? And then there's just some connection, and you stay in touch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to your point, whether it's divine intervention or whatever it may be, that there's something special about that.
And there can be strategy to it though. I mean, I don't know, maybe if y'all tell me that this may be a little bit the wrong way to think about it, but like, a relationship that you can build with somebody that's in your industry or somebody you're trying to do business with in a way, like genuinely feeling and being authentic about wanting to learn from them about how they became successful, they almost feel bought into your success whenever you take their advice and you bring it back to them and say, this is what you gave me as a advisor. Like, and you might not have intended for it to be, but I asked you advice, you gave it to me. I took it, I used it, and it worked. Or I took it and I used it and waiting for it to work. They're going to then be like, well, I give them that advice. I want to make sure that shit works, you know?
Correct.
So, like, I think there's a strategy to it. I don't want it to seem like you're like, manipulating people, but like, if you're intentional and genuine and you're looking to grow, but you're also adding value to those people around you too, you can be intentional with finding a mentor that's not being paid for.
Well, I think you have to be
synergy.
intentional about finding a mentor, because if you're not intentional, what will happen is the people come into your life in a fleeting moment. And if you're not intentionally looking, you're going to miss it. And then, what I often share with people too is there's active mentors and passive mentors. And so I'm an active mentor, right? And so, but you also come into contact with people who are not really like you, meaning they're more passive, and you have to learn to recognize them as well. And then you have to go intentionally, right, follow up with them, because they're not gonna hand you the book, right? They're not gonna say you can accomplish anything. You've got to pull it out of them a little bit, but they give you some indication that there's something there and they're willing. But you have to. So my point is, I think intent is definitely part. Without intent, you'll never have a mentor, right? Sure. You have to understand what you're seeking.
So that'll be a good transition into the things you're doing now too. Because in a way, in mentoring, advising, consulting is something that you're doing, and like we were talking about before we turned the cameras on, we talked about your strategy and what you want to do. And as a lawyer, people come to us about questions about the gambit, right? A to Z. I get medical malpractice questions to criminal law questions to actually things that I actually know what I'm talking about when it comes to
For the
real
record,
estate.
we are not starting a medical
Not doing
malpractice
that.
division.
No, not yet.
Bad idea.
But from a business consulting side, you've done that, like growing a business, putting a business back together, bringing on partners. Because I think that you've had several transitions of partners even before you transitioned to your the partners you have now taking over the practice in your senior advisor role. But now in your role of helping businesses be acquired or grow, or whatever advice you need. Let's talk about the intricacies of that in the area that you really enjoy, right? The X's and O's legal side's always there. But then there's also that more intangible side of business that people need to be concerned with. So let's talk about that. So what's the transition? What are you going to be doing now? What are you looking to do?
At the core, right, I really enjoy two things the most. I really like a deal. Right.
Amen.
There's something
Closing
about
a
the
deal.
energy of whether it's just the early stages of talking about it and it really never goes any further. Those are still great conversations, right? And then, of course, the ones where you get to actually work through it and maybe it doesn't get consummated, maybe it falls apart, and then you get the ones that go. So I really, really like that. And I like using my varied experience, right? So not just the legal side of it. I like bringing all the other things that I've experienced to the table for people who, in some cases, have experienced some of it. In other cases, maybe they haven't, right? So I like a deal. And then the other thing is, I'm a people person. And I love getting an opportunity to impact someone, whether it's personally or professionally. So in a professional context, seeing somebody just having a business issue that they, not making this bigger than it is, they just can't get to it, right? Or they never had to redo a website, right? They did it when they started their business 12 years ago, and boy, life has changed since then. And they're not on Facebook, so they don't understand those components, right? And I'm not a marketing expert, but I've done enough of it to be able to help someone work through just doing something as quote unquote simple as that.
You have the resources to put them in the right direction.
That's right.
Yeah.
Let's
Let's talk about that. As somebody's trying to grow and scale their business, we've talked about like the mindset that a business owner has to have, right? And sometimes people have an idea they get presented with, and they're fun to talk about. Like we have enjoyed talking about ideas a lot of times, and if it doesn't meet our purpose, sometimes it can be a shiny object or a squirrel that we have to divert from. And some people think that they have a business to sell, but they really don't have anything in place to actually sell a business. They just have a business that they've been doing without having a process in place, or They think that they're ready to bring on a partner, but they're really not in the right mindset. How do you help the client work through that?
So I think those are two different things. I think, the sale of a business doesn't necessarily have to be scaled to sell it, right? So let's separate those out. The minds in this room think about scaling, I know, but there are lots of businesses that are not scaled and are sold, and then maybe they're sold to someone who does scale it. Okay, so I would separate those. I think on the scaling side, to me, if you're going to scale a business, there's some things you need to know going into it. You've got to have that vision. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Let's say you have a franchise. Do you want to be the person who has 1,000, or you good with 10? Right. So what's the vision there? You've got to have drive, the work ethic. I'm just, I saw one of your podcasts recently, and I was very jealous of the guy talking about how he has his business set up and homeschooling his children and spending all that time. I was a little envious of that because I didn't have that in my life at that time when I was growing my business.
Yeah, there was a whole chunk of my life that I honestly don't remember.
It's tough. And so I kind of go old school on this. So it just takes drive and intensity. Persistence. You need passion. And to me, I define passion as what's going to get you out of the bed in the morning when you're not feeling well, right? Or maybe you had a late night or something like that. It's that passion around what you're doing, and not necessarily what you're going to be doing that day,
right,
but over your big picture, right? And then the last one is sacrifice. You all know better than anyone right now, and it's emotional sacrifice, it's economic sacrifice, and so those four things, right, to me are the drivers of what's going to lead someone to be able to scale their business. The rest can all work its way out, but without any one of those, and they don't all have to be a 10. They're a challenge every day, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
But they've got to be on the board.
Yeah.
And an intangible in that person's life, in that person's characteristic, has to be those things. If you remove them, any one of those in my mind, you have a real challenge.
Oh my God!
Absolutely.
You hit on so many things there. I mean, people don't talk enough about the sacrifice piece of it. You know what I mean? And I heard we had somebody that recently we were talking to them, and they said 8 months of sacrifice. I'm like, and look, when we started this firm, I called one of my buddies who had started a firm in New Orleans, and I was like, what did you do to get ready? He's like, dude, 12 months worth of reserves, no doubt. I'm like, dude, I got this. 3 months, we're going to be good to go. We're 2 years in, and you're still sacrificing. And there's just no doubt that a conversation.
Sacrificing is because of the reinvestment.
100%.
That's what I think makes it even harder. People are sacrificing because they don't have a level of success. It's a totally different kind of sacrifice when you do have the success, but you're choosing to reinvest in your community and in your business. That's the discipline that lets you get there 10 years from now, your 20-year vision, that people are just short-sighted on.
You took the words literally. I wouldn't have said it that way, but that's exactly where I was going, in that the economic sacrifice and the reinvestment, people think about it in the most basic terms. Like when you reinvest in your business, well, how much money did you put in your business last year? Like out of your bank account and put it back in. And it's like, well, that's one way that someone can reinvest in their business. Hopefully you can avoid that if you can, but you may not be able to. There may be times you have to do that. But there's a reinvestment in the business in almost every business decision being made. Do I go to the conference or not? Do I take someone with me who's my future buyer? Right? And that's 8 years ago. It doesn't happen overnight, right? We need to buy a new server. Do we do the one that'll hold us over today, or do we spend a little more, right? Because we're going to add another office. So those decision points are happening very fast, especially in a growing business. And people lose sight of how much of an investment and sacrifice that is, because there are other business owners who operate very differently. I'm not saying they're wrong, and they take all the extra cash off the table, okay? In some cases, I've often wondered, they may be in better shape than me, right?
Right.
But it's not how I'm wired, right?
Same.
And so you got to kind of play to how you're wired and focus on yourself and your own business.
You stack ranked the 4 key components of being able to scale, but the first one you said was vision, and I think you said it first because it is the most important one. Because like you talked about Drew, who's very intentional about his business. He's very intentional about his business because his vision was very intentionally done. He knows what he needs to do and what he wants his business to do for him, and he has that vision. And then he's able to scale, work backwards to say, okay, then this is what I have to do it's what I can do. This is what I'm going to be willing to do. And he can say no to a lot of things because it doesn't get him to his vision. But you got to have clarity there first.
And he's guarding. Guarding is very important too, right? He's guarding the vision in that one of the things he said was, you asked him something like, well, how many of these storage facilities do you want, And he said, I don't think I want to be that big, right? I think he's at whatever, he said 14 now. He says,
Right.
I don't know, 20, 25. To me, when I hear that, that's someone guarding their plan.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is, if I go to 50, he knows what that means.
Mm-hmm.
He now understands that, right?
It disrupts his ecosystem that
And
he
the
built.
sacrifice-
It's going to mess up his overall family ecosystem, right?
Yep.
And so I thought that was very interesting because guarding things is one of the hardest things to do, right?
Especially people who get excited to talk about a deal. Right. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, it is. I mean, it all goes back to, the most exciting thing to talk about before we started this thing, opportunity popped up on my phone. Again, the most exciting part of my day was a text message saying I'm ready to talk about that deal. It's just fun. It is fun to do a deal. But like some people,
It's hope. It's opportunity.
Exactly.
It's excitement. It is.
yeah, and
But
help.
I got asked to speak just this past Friday on balance. And so I started the presentation with, I'm going to leave a moment for everybody that knows me to laugh because I know that they think my balance looks crazy. But at the end of the day, what I narrowed it down for everybody in the exercise that I walk them through is it's being your authentic self. Like, how are you wired? You mentioned it earlier. I'm just not made that way. I'm just not
Right.
wired that way, right? Acknowledging who you are and having that awareness, and then living your priorities. So when we sat there with that particular business owner that is setting those boundaries around what he wants his life to look like, he's living his priorities.
Right.
And I'm happy for him to do that. But it's not going to look the same for every other entrepreneur. And so when they come to me and say, I want this and I want this level of success, help me find the balance, I'm like, you have to put in the work. You have to put in the work to figure out who you are. You have to put in the work to figure out, what your priorities are, and then how to communicate that to the people in your circle. And like one of our challenges that come that's separate from you go and speak to the solo entrepreneur that wants to scale is we have to fit in the priorities and the awareness of 4 individuals because there's 4 partners, steering this ship. And that's a whole nother challenge in and of itself.
Yep.
Yeah, but again, and we're talking about scaling right now and the intangibles behind it. But that's the fun part about meeting with a business owner and talking to them about what it's going to take to actually take the next step. I literally downstairs had the same conversation, but that's why when I went downstairs to get the coffee, I was delayed because I was talking to a guy and he was like, "I need to meet with you guys to talk about what's going to be the next step." I'm like, "Well, you have to know what your goal is." Because if you know what your goal is and the role that you're in, you know how many of the things that you do every day you have to do in a day to get to that goal. And if it's more than what you can do, then you already know that you have to hire somebody else and that you have to hire an admin to be able to help. So like you have to know what your vision is in order to make the decision to go scale. And I was like, dude, I told him, I was like, you tell me when you're ready and I'll clear my calendar. Because in my mind, that's the funnest conversation for me to have with a client.
Jared has to be careful though. He'll create a vision for them.
Yeah.
That is his gift, right? And you have somebody that comes to you and you got to be careful not to do that. Especially, like you and I working with these business owners, it's not our job to create their vision for them. It's to help them walk through that exercise so that they do it for themselves, right? And I think that's that tool of awareness that I'm always looking at for entrepreneurs, whether they spent the time to say, this is my gift and this is my area. Because how many people, especially, I like to say we're Main Street USA, not Wall Street USA. My nice phrase for our small businesses, right? Like you have this one guy that has been incredible to our community, building a business that's revenued a great deal of money for his family for the last 30 years. So you don't want to tell that guy, no, you don't have a business. But at the end of the day, he's just been doing his thing. So it's not necessarily a vision. It's what he's created for himself, right? That's not something that can turn necessarily and just easily scale.
Yeah, it's a fine line to explain to someone that there's no value for blood, sweat, and tears.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
that's
like,
hurtful
if they
for
don't
everyone who's ever owned their own business because you're
Absolutely.
like, really?
They think they're building a legacy and they're like, this is what's going to protect my family. We have advisors that come to us because they're like, they don't want to give anything to retirement because their business is their legacy. And I'm like, let me look at their business. Oh, when he dies, that business dies.
Right.
It gives their family nothing. But that individual, as wonderful as his gifts may be, he may not have the gift of vision. And without that gift of vision, you cannot scale.
Yeah, I think you have to know your blind spots, right? And the bigger the ego, the harder it is to recognize the blind spots.
Yeah.
Right?
That was the first part of our presentation yesterday. It's being self-aware enough to know what your limitations are and what your blind spots are, and having advisors and consultants and lawyers and people that you can trust to come in and tell you and be humble enough to have them point out where you're going to struggle or what issues you're going to have transitioning into whatever you're scaling or you're selling. And so let's talk. And we can talk about selling too, right? I mean, I think it's a little bit different conversation for somebody who's looking to sell their business too. And so when you have somebody that you're working with to sell their business, like what are you working through again from the intangible side with those people to make sure that they're ready to do that?
So I'm a qualitative person. I learned this word several years ago, and then I realized it's definitely me.
Became your word, huh?
Yes. And unlike the one I can't pronounce you said earlier, entrepreneurial lawyer.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'll never get that out.
Yeah.
So, because I'm more of a kind of relationship guy, data has certainly been a new tool for me and always more of a challenge. So when you look at someone selling their business, right, I think the first thing you got to understand is who you're dealing with, and are they more of a data person or are they more of a touchy-feely person, right? And then I feel like the last 15 years, the world has become so data, what's the word I'm looking for? Sensitive. It's all about the data. And the reality of it in my mind, especially small and mid-sized businesses, the data is important, right? And oftentimes you're dealing with companies that have limited opportunity to even give you the data, right? And so, but in those smaller and mid-sized businesses, the qualitative side is really important, right?
People.
It's is there going to be a cultural fit? Does the organization that's acquiring behave anywhere near the way the seller does?
Value alignment.
Is this going to be a longer term payout, or is this just a check and it's over? So if it's a check and it's over, then we deal with that in a different way, right? But a lot of times there's a payout structure and things like that. And so I really feel like the qualitative side is really important. And I think that needs to be kind of discussed at the outset. Again, it starts back, not to overuse the word, but why is the seller sitting there with you? Are you really ready? What does ready mean? What are you going to do after this? You're going to be part of the business going forward. If that's important to you, we need to know that, right? Because Jared's buying a business and he's the smartest guy in the room always. I'm kidding, but he doesn't want you in the business anymore, right? So we have to be ready for that.
I mean, that's half of the acquisitions that come across our desk, huh?
Yeah, and it's feeling that out, and I think as you then move through that phase, then you can kind of move into normalizing the P&L is another big issue, right? Especially in small and mid-sized businesses. When
what does that mean, normalizing the P&L? I mean, I have an idea what that means. I know y'all deal with that a lot more. So
well, I use the term. I don't know if it's scientific or it's correct.
Well, so what do you mean by that?
What I mean is you go look at a small business's P&L, right? And they show a loss. And they've shown a loss for the last 10 years, okay? So now we have to understand, well, what does that mean? Is that tax planning losses, right? Because you had some write-offs, you had some deductions, depreciation, all these things. Or is it living out of the business? And there's appropriate, obviously, expenses, and then there's inappropriate expenses, according to the IRS, right? But when you get into the books of a small business, you have to, I call it normalizing it. We have to say, well, look, you spent $2,000 a year or $5,000 on Saints tickets, right? So
the Philadelphia company is buying you. They're not going to want
right.
to
And so, we're going to need to take that and put it in one of these categories. And to a certain degree, we're actually going to say, well, that's not going to get spent anymore. Maybe we're going to slide it over. That's actually income now, right?
Absent the creative accounting, how healthy is the P&L?
Yeah. So you're just basically saying, if we're going to take this out of, you and your CPA's hands, and we're going to go show it to someone who's interested in buying your company, we have to show them what it's really doing, right? Like, what is the real money coming in, and what are the real expenses that they're going to have to address? And anything that's not that, we have to move it out into another category, right? Which becomes important because the seller is used to getting the brand new car every 3 years, and the seller is used to lots of LSU and Saints tickets.
When does that come as part of our business plan?
Not yet. Remember the reinvestment? Sacrifice, bro.
Yeah. Maybe I was talking about myself just now. No, just kidding. But so normalizing it is a process, right? And you work through that with them. And then after you normalize it, then you can move to more traditional valuations. Okay, let's do it down. I call it down and dirty EBITDA, right? And, most business people don't really understand that. So you go through that, and this is what that means. And then we're going to take that, we're going to have a multiplier. That's how we're going to figure it out. And so you have to normalize it to get there, which is why I believe the first step of comfort, right, candor, as we were talking about earlier, is really important in the beginning, right, in kind of getting to know each other and understanding what they really want. Because when you get down to the numbers and that normalization, it can get a little uncomfortable, and people don't really understand.
Yeah.
And they forget to look at the practical side too. I'll get a lot of small business acquisitions, and they'll say, I want something profitable. And they're like, oh, I met this guy. And then they send everything over, and they see the losses. And they're like, this isn't even worth you spending your time on. And I'm like, what kind of vehicle do they drive?
Right.
Where do they live? Does their spouse work? No. Okay, it's worth our time. It's worth our time. They're clearly doing good, living a certain lifestyle, the lifestyle that you were looking for. Let's look and see, how they're actually running their business.
Not to mention, there's also opportunities in businesses that have been struggling.
Absolutely.
Right. And
Yeah,
and
sure.
sometimes they're struggling, maybe because the industry demands outgrew their ability. So therefore, and their ability to infuse capital or anything. And so therefore they really just need to join a bigger group for economies of scale. Now you can unlock profit, right? So you could take a business that was losing, and I'm going to take that one, put it in the same business over here that's just a little bit bigger, but we're going to unlock profit by doing that, right? By playing to the economies of scale.
Profitable company with a bad cash flow.
Yeah.
Again,
Right.
fix the cash flow problem, you have a profitable company again.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of...
I heard somebody talking about the concept of like locking arms to other businesses that are in your same industry that you can, like y'all as a group can look like a more saleable business to a bigger company by having a couple of other businesses that you kind of lock arms with, again, from a kind of your scale and your regional and geographic footprint look differently. For somebody coming in and might say, well, I'm interested in this region, not necessarily as one of them, but all of y'all together, if y'all are willing to come together in some agreement how you're going to get paid out, the group of you can be bought as opposed to an individual unit of those businesses too.
Yeah, and there are ways to do that that doesn't require equity
formalizing
adjustments, right?
Exactly.
You can, and there's been some law firms that have done it in other businesses. You set up, the operating company that has shared services agreements all the way around, and you let that operating company go to the marketplace to be sold, right? With a long-term deal with each one of those. Now everyone gets to, the three of us still have our own company that we own. No one's messed with that. And then, the venture capital, whoever's going to come in and buy that operating agreement.
Yeah.
Operating company. So, and that's why I think, really, if you're going to consult a business on this, the business has to be willing to invest some time with you so you can understand, right? Because I feel like the more I understand, then the more I get to lean on all of my experiences, right? If you just come to me with, a small slice, then I might only be able to give you my legal thought. But if I can spend some time and understand what's going on, now I get to kind of pull into all of my experiences, right? And whether it's, former partner arrangements that didn't work or other mergers and acquisitions I've done. So it's really about, are they willing to sacrifice, right? And meaning time mostly. The money is important too, but it's really more time, right? Time's the biggest commodity we all have. It's limited.
You have so much extra time. I don't know why are you looking up.
Somebody tried to talk me into getting up earlier in the morning trying to get things done as opposed to going to bed later. But like, if you go to bed later, you really could like stay up all night if you wanted to, right? But if you get up earlier, you've already given away all those hours. You have to go to things start happening in the day. So like, I have to get it done before.
You're a vampire. Just stay up all night. It's
Anyway,
fine.
I don't want to. But anyway, I will, and I think this is all going to be super valuable information for people here. I do want to pull on something else, kind of a little bit of shift in mindset. And again, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. One of the first things I remember about Chris Couch was that when I first got started, y'all consistently had a weekly meeting at your firm, like every single week. And then you had an executive assistant who was transcribing your notes. And it was just, and from my perspective, you probably did a lot of other things to create leverage around your time, right? and you had a good time. Like I remember you always went to the festivals in New Orleans. You're a huge music guy, and you always had fun. You always had things going on at the office. You had a lot of people moving around. You had levels of management. Everybody had roles, and everybody was managing people. And it was just impressive to see, because I read some books on what small businesses getting to that point, but you had 100 employees, right, at the firm and at the New Orleans office. And it just seemed as though you had created a structure in which people were playing to their strengths, and you had leverage in all the ways that you had it. Like, what was your mindset about leverage whenever you were running business? And is there like a rule of thumb you had, or like what was, like, just tell me about the leverage piece?
Well, I think I'm a natural delegator. So I say that because I've seen a lot of younger managers and supervisors and people really struggle with delegation, and over delegating can be bad. And I've certainly over delegated in instances before. But I think that's been a minority, right? And so I'll take that shot and play the delegation card if I can have a good score, right? So I think I naturally felt, and some of my mentors had kind of told me over and over again, look, if you're going to buy the law firm, you're not buying a job. You can go get a job wherever you want. But if you're going to take the risk to buy the firm, and I was young, I was 33 when I bought the firm. And so, it kind of embedded in my brain, like, okay, well, how am I going to do this? So one of the first things I did to be able to leverage myself is I made sure I didn't take any day-to-day responsibilities, meaning signing lawsuits, right, or going to court, to try to build buffers in on those. Because that was what I had seen in my earlier career of what tied down especially lawyers, but also business people, is they're too tied to the day-to-day operation.
They're in the business.
In the functions, right? And so I learned that if I could stay away from that and just give oversight, right, then that could free me up. And so by giving myself that time flexibility, it then allowed me to float on top of the business. So if I had an opportunity to go meet a client, I could book the flight tomorrow and go, and I wasn't worried about, oh no, who's going to sign the court cost checks for us?
Yeah.
Right. And so, and really my former boss really positioned me for that, as he pulled my litigation from me, my hourly billings, right, in prep for that sale. He really helped start that. And then I think, again, being a natural delegator, trusting in people, and trying to give them as much as they can handle to let you do the things you need to be doing, or you think you need to be doing, to grow the business.
So two sides to that, and I'm kind of leading with some questions here. Were you more of finding the natural fit for the role, or was training a big part of your delegation and leverage?
You mean as I was looking for someone to take something on?
Any role that you had in the organization.
It was a combination. It just depended on, our first, in 2008 to, I don't know, the first 4 or 5 years of the firm, we had 20 to 25% year-over-year growth in the top line.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That was the good news.
Yeah.
The bad news was we also had incredible expense growth along the way.
Yep.
But we were doing okay, right? And so, and we were doing what our real goal was, which was, we didn't have any idea of how far I wanted to scale it, but I knew I needed to get bigger, because the cost to run a collection firm is continuing to grow on a daily basis, and it was back then. So when you ask that question about, well, how did you prepare the people you were going to delegate to? I think most of it was probably, I just had a feel, because I'm a relationship person. So if somebody's working in the environment, I kind of did my best to get to know them and know enough about their skill. And then a lot of times it was just trial by fire. It was like, hey, Jared looks like he needs some more work. And so, it's a combination, and I think especially when it's a fast moving business, and legal collections is fast. It's really fast paced, and you never get all the work done. And so the environment is really hard to maintain morale and to keep people focused, right? It takes a certain type of person.
Yeah.
And so all of that comes into play as you're working through how do you leverage off these different things.
Yeah. I know y'all had a training program. You had a training room. People come in, and if you onboarded, you had to watch modules. And
yes.
I think that was a lot of the regulation too. Probably played a lot into that. But I do know that y'all had a process for hiring people and things like that. So I think it all played into it. But it's always interesting to me because I'm a natural delegator too. Nobody's gonna be surprised to hear that. but I also am, I do like to get things done. So if I have to step in, I will. But I do like to have people. I like solving problems with people, like having people on my team, good people that I like spending time with, that all are excited about doing hard work. But I'm not the best like trainer. Like here's a training manual. I like to show people how to do it, which can take time, right, from somebody who's trying to delegate. So I was just curious about your mindset around that.
I think the other part of it too is trust, right? Truly having faith in the team and let them take their steps. I think, I think all of us share a certain personality trait that makes us good delegators, right? We want to accomplish a task. We know we need to move quickly. We know that we need resources and we're committed to that. But that same personality trait also knows at times that I can get this done faster. I can do this better myself. And so you have to also develop that other side of that personality trait that allows you to trust people to do their job and give them the opportunity to impress you.
Fortunately for me, I've never really thought that I could do a lot of things better as the business started to grow, right? I just innately kind of knew where my blind spots were. And but I do see a lot of people struggle, and not always because they're egotistical, but just because they're naturally good at a lot of things, right? And they're super
and
smart,
driven. And
and they're driven, right?
They know they have the drive that'll make them move faster than someone else in the room.
Now, if I was running something other than a law firm,
Yeah.
I might feel differently. I might have been like, if we're running, a restaurant or something, I might say, no, actually, I feel like I can be a better bartender or server, and I'm happy to go do those things, right? But certainly in the context of a law firm, I always felt like I needed to surround myself with people who were a lot smarter than me.
For sure.
And if I could couple that with work ethic, we'd be in good shape, right? And so I never really struggled with that one, but it's definitely at play.
Yeah. And I think that if you think about it from a visual standpoint, if you have the 4 quadrants, like the bottom right is what you're not good at, you don't like doing. This next one next to it is what you're good at, but you don't like doing. The next one is what you are not good at, but you do like doing, right? And then you have the one you're good at and you like doing. It's whenever you've delegated the things you're not good at, you don't like doing. You delegated this box, you delegated that box. Whenever you actually only have that box of things you're good at and you like doing that are left, that you got to delegate a piece of that, that's where something's hard for me, right? Like the admin work, the actual heavy lifting legal work, all that stuff, like I'll delegate that all day and I'll look back. But it's the part of it where the problem solving, the relationship side of the business, like that kind of part of it where I know that I'm good at and I love it. That's the part of it that I have a hard time delegating, that I always want to come back to like, I can help, I can solve that problem, I can do it. And what I feel is probably as good or better than other people. And that's the part that's hard to delegate. When you get to that point as a business owner, you have to trust, let them take their swings because they likely can be good at it too. And if they enjoy doing it.
Well, and I think it's a natural progression. And I think when you're in that quadrant and you're struggling with giving something up, you have to tap into these other characteristics that you have, which is, I can maintain oversight. I can jump in this bucket willingly and do a very good job, and maybe better than who I'm going to get in the bucket with me. But then the other side of it comes is that when you get a good candidate to get in the bucket with you, and you start to give them opportunities, and you start to realize then maybe you weren't the best person in the firm at this.
Right.
And to a certain
me, that's success. That is leadership winning.
And look, that happened to me twice at the firm. Ben on some of the compliance issues and the nuance of the legal interpretations and things was Ben. And then on the relationship, which is my bucket, right? But Serena
She's great.
She's fantastic. And so over time, I started to think to myself, well, maybe, Couch, you were wrong. Maybe you're not the best at this in the firm.
I remember watching her at the Zurich Classic, man. She was working the room.
Yeah.
She's good at it.
She's just a natural, natural people person.
She's got the it factor.
And people will confide in her and instantly befriend her in ways I've never seen before in my life. So, and for me, and looking to transition out of the firm, I needed to make sure that both sides were present, right? Like we need someone on the qualitative and the quantitative, and they can both do both, but where they're comfortable, right? And I think that's a big part of it. And for anyone selling their business, right, you need, especially if it's on a longer term payout, you got to do your best to make sure that the people who are going in, at least on the most important things, that they're going to be able to hold them down and grow them, right? But that to me is how you approach that, right? You find someone that you're like, okay, if I'm going to give this up, this is how I'm going to do
Yeah.
it. And then you feel good about that.
For sure.
Right.
We heard a conversation today about some of the people on the team, and like I'm really excited about our quarter coming up to an end, because I'm glad to be able to give some accolades to these people that are like really stepping up, at least on in the area of business that I focus on, because they're doing a really good job. And it does feel good to have somebody who's equally as good or performing as well as you can perform too. So that's fun.
You can feel their buy-in and their commitment.
Oh man, so it feels so good, and to be able to be proud about the person you're delegating stuff to. You know, it really.
I had one of the best conversations today, because we have very few people in our organization outside of the 4 owners that have been given a position of leadership, actually hold other people accountable in our organization, because we're coaching them through what that looks like for our culture, and our culture had to build itself. We've only been at this a couple of years. And one of those leaders I was meeting with today, and one of the people she holds accountable, she was like, I was training the other day, and she started correcting me and taught me things I didn't know. And she was almost hesitant to tell me, and I was like, that means you're winning at leading.
That's right.
It means you're winning at leading. I was like so happy for her. I'm like, you should feel so good about yourself. And to Jared's point, to have these people that we brought in, to know we brought in the right people when they're performing to a level that they're teaching us.
Correct.
Yeah, it's fun.
Exciting.
That's a win.
Well, cool. Well, this was a great conversation, man. Again, we've had 2 great conversations today. I mean, the goal of this is to help businesses grow. And if you're looking to grow and scale, you listen to this episode, you're going to get some great information.
Yeah.
So
You dropped a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Do I get to drop the mic?
Yeah.
you can.
Just kick it. Just kick it over.
No, thank you all very much for having me. And I've been in St. Tammany 25 years now. It's flown by.
Yeah.
But I haven't really had an opportunity to speak. It was always on the national scene because of our client base, right? So to do something in St. Tammany and now to be doing work more regionally is a lot of fun for me, because I have all these relationships with people, but I haven't had a chance to work with them.
Bringing it home.
So it's been good. Yeah. And y'all are doing a great job with this. So keep it up.
Well,
Thank you, Chris.
we don't have to make this the only time, so come back and
That's
chat
right.
some more.
Whenever y'all have got coffee ready, I'm in.
All right, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank y'all.